Judging by years of consistently disappointing YouTube search results, I would say the Walther P5 is something of a forgotten relic in the Walther catalog. Despite its decent production numbers and a reasonably healthy surplus market not all that long ago, there's only one good overview video in English, and that's by firydeth from 7 years ago, and then just a load of brief shooting clips. Meanwhile, the PPK, PPQ, P22, P38, even the lowly PK380 have dozens of review videos each. This gun deserves better. Developed in response to the 1972 terrorist attack at the Olympic Games in Munich, the gun's basic design actually stretches back to 1938 in Walther's famous P38 and the later P1 and P4. Over 30 years of real-world testing led to the P5's updated design, which integrated several notable enhancements while still making use of the P38's battle-proven falling locking block recoil action. These functional improvements include a better and more robust double-action single-action trigger mechanism, a reinforced alloy frame for improved durability, a longer enclosed slide for added strength when handling hot ammo, a redesigned extractor, as well as some ergonomic updates like removing the safety from the slide, an enlarged trigger guard for gloved hands, and streamlined contouring for better holsterability. I wish I could do a more in-depth hands-on comparison between the P38 and the P5, but honestly, even as a certified Walther fanboy, I've just never really been into the P38. Suffice it to say, though, that the relation between the two pistols is a strong one, to the point that you can even swap mags with a very minor and easy modification. I'll put a link to more info on that process below. The P5 was successful in its bid to German agencies seeking a new single-stack 9mm sidearm, and the design was awarded several police contracts alongside two of its competitors, the SIG P6 and the H&K P7. The P5 finally entered production in 1977 and was fielded by police forces across Germany and the Netherlands, the majority of whom were pleased with Walther's offering. In 1986, Walther decided to respond to customer demand for a lightened, more concealable version for undercover or plainclothes officers and began developing the P5 Compact. The designer smoothed the edges and corners of the gun and made everything smaller while still keeping it large enough for durability and rugged use. The compact model went into production in late 1987. The company successfully pitched this P5 variant to the British military, who adopted a phosphate-finished version as the L102A1 and put them into service with various army units to replace their PPKs. Finding one of these would be cool because it could have literally been used by a real-life James Bond type guy. Finally, in 1988, Walther introduced a sporting model, the P5 Long, which is the model I have here. I used to have a regular P5 as well, but decided I didn't really need it after scoring this unicorn. With only 100 in existence, this long-barreled target variant is certainly a jewel in my Walther collection. Despite its target pretensions, however, the internals are identical to any other P5, only its lengthened sight radius enhances performance at the range. Virtually all P5s were chambered in 9mm, but 1900 or so were produced in 30 Luger. Separate kits were also available to allow users to convert their 9mm P5s to fire 30 Luger. Production of the P5 ended around 1993 after a total run of 100,000 units over its lifespan. Nearly half of these were made for Dutch police forces, who issued them until 2013, believe it or not. So you may be looking at this P5 Long wondering, what do you have against the P38 anyway when that P5 so obviously resembles one? To be honest, besides not being all that interested in the historical aspects of the P38, I've always found its aesthetics to be very rough and cobbled together with little cohesion between any of the different parts. This is especially apparent to me on surplus models with significant finish wear, where the gun's actual lines become clear and they just look like they were pieced together from scrap metal in Mad Max. The P5, on the other hand, has a much improved aesthetic thanks to the streamlined angles of the nose, cleaned up decocker, a hammer that actually matches the gun, and a more elegant slide. Even with this longer sport barrel, the P5's appearance is more refined and purposeful to my eye. The P5 is really just a great looking gun, though I will admit that I find the proportions on the compact to be a little bit off the mark, with the chop slide being just a tad too short for the long grip. Now, do any of my subjective opinions on the P5's appearance matter? No, but I do think guns can be beautiful and their visual design can be a really interesting point of discussion. You guys can obviously make your own judgment calls on how you think the gun looks. Finishing on both the full-size and compact is excellent, with old-world quality polished bluing on each model and only faint traces of machining marks here and there. I will note that the police guns tended to have more of a matte finish, which isn't quite as special looking, but nonetheless they are all very nicely fit together with no looseness and a confident feeling of solidity that one would expect from Walther of the era. I probably wouldn't say it's quite as finely finished as the later P88, but in good commercial condition I think the P5 is definitely a gun that my fellow hipster snobs can be proud to own. By the way, none of them ever came with a nickel or chrome finish, so if you see one of those, it's aftermarket. The P5 family are all built on alloy frames with a single stack 8-round magazine. While a few of them came with beautiful wood grips, most were sold with plain black plastic grip panels. I personally tend to put nil wood grips on any gun where it's an option, and I've done that with my P5 Long here. I appreciate the added palm swell it gives the grip, and plus they just look more upscale and classic. The regular black plastic panels do give the gun a menacing Darth Vader sort of look though, which is cool, so I won't judge anyone for keeping those on their P5. Dutch police models are notable for having black rubber hoe grips. The magazine releases are found on the bottom of the full-size models in the German tradition. In many ways, this is a nice feature for a holstered police duty weapon since there's no button to be pressed accidentally while seated or moving around. The compact variants had their releases moved to the conventional American location behind the trigger guard, though some rare early models also had a heel release, like this one. The mags are not even close to drop free and must be pulled out by hand. This obviously is in keeping with the high-speed, low-drag trends of 2016, but it was pretty much the norm in the 1970s and was probably not the end of the world for your average German police officer. The magazines, by the way, are interchangeable if your compact has the heel release, and they have excellent build quality. A distinctive element of the P5's controls and design is this large flat decocker on the left side. It's a nice aesthetic upgrade over the P38's ungainly lever, and I believe it's more comfortable to use as well. I will note that it is not ambidextrous, but it's still within easy reach of even the stumpiest circus hands, and has a satisfying and assured engagement with the hammer as you lower it safely. It sounds weird, but it's really just a pleasure to decock the P5, let alone shoot it. The piece also serves as a slide stop and a slide release, incidentally, to either hold the slide open or let it come forward. You might have noticed that there are no external safeties on the P5. Like with the P6, this was intentionally left out to meet the German police request that their new pistol be fast to put into action with one hand, and fiddling with the safety lever is decidedly slower and less intuitive than simply pulling a longer double action trigger from a decocked condition too. The gun is safe to carry this way thanks to a firing pin safety whereby the trigger itself moves the pin into position for the hammer to strike it. Without a conscious pull of the trigger, the P5 is completely safe. There's also a recess in the hammer itself to make sure it can't accidentally bump the firing pin. Overall, I find the gun's ergonomics and handling to be really well thought out. The grip on the full-size model has a good shape, made even better, of course, with the wood grips. Balance on the full-size is excellent, even on this model with the long barrel dangling out front. The compact likewise has surprisingly good weight distribution, despite its abruptly stunted slide. The compact's grip size is, like the rest of the gun, a little smaller in circumference and depth, and hovers right on the border of being too small for me. The only real quibble I might have with the P5's feeling in the hand is that the magazine lip can rub your little finger if your hands are large enough. I'll compare them both briefly to the Glock 17 so you can get an idea of just how big they are. You can see that the full size is generally not a large gun, though it is a bit on the thick side, especially for a single stack holding only 8 rounds. In our world of subcompact polymer 9mm, it might not be the most ideal choice for concealed carry, but it could be done without too much trouble if you wanted. The P5 Compact would certainly be even easier to carry, but the long grip would still probably print a bit. The slide serrations are ample on both sizes, and with the unique non-tilting barrel design and top-tier build quality, racking it is gloriously smooth. Much like a well-tuned Beretta 92, which uses the same basic system inside, the slide racks like it's on ice. Only the Pardini GT9 and SIG P210 are smoother in my experience. This lever here is for field stripping the gun, which I'll demonstrate now to show you that falling locking block mechanism I keep referencing. The process could hardly be simpler. You just remove the magazine, pull the slide back a little bit to align a divot in the slide with the lever on the frame, flip the lever down, and pull the slide off. There you can see the dual recoil springs in the frame, which by itself is pretty cool in my opinion, and the locking block that attaches the barrel and keeps the barrel and slide locked together as a unit until chamber pressure begins to dissipate. As in the Beretta 92, the slide and barrel recoil together for a short distance until this block here drops down. This frees the slide to keep traveling rearward while the barrel stays in one place, ready for the next round to be chambered and to repeat the process. Here you can see the slide rails go the entire length of the frame, which of course helps contribute to greater accuracy and more consistent lockup. So here is how the smaller P5 compares internally, and it's really about the same inside and uses the same basic mechanisms. The compact appears to be dimensionally very similar to the full-size model, right down to the takedown lever's position in the frame. Many of the parts look to the naked eye like they'd even be interchangeable, and I know you can actually put the compact slide onto the full-size frame. I doubt it would shoot like this, but who knows. If it weren't for the frame jutting out and giving it a weird underbite, I think this would actually be a really awesome looking mid-size P5 variant. Reassembly is the reverse of disassembly, and it's pretty straightforward. Shooting these P5s is truly a delight. The full-size model predates the widespread adoption of the 3-dot sight picture and used a 2-dot arrangement that's actually pretty easy to see, with a big white circle up front that you position directly above a single white mark in the back, like some modern aftermarket sights popular today. The compacts of the late 80s and early 90s had a more familiar 3-dot arrangement, which is similarly easy to use. Sights on both are only windage adjustable in the rear. Accuracy in all variants is excellent for me. The long sight radius on the long model gives you a bit of an edge, of course, but even my original full-size model with the shorter 3.5-inch barrel was quite easy to shoot well. It's a very smooth gun to shoot, which is noticeable and due probably in part to the linear motion of the barrel. The alloy-framed pistol isn't overly heavy at 29.9 ounces or 848 grams, but recoil is still very manageable, and the main takeaway for me is the smoothness. Very pleasant at the range. The compact is a dense gun, being markedly smaller than the full-size, but still weighing 27.2 ounces or 771 grams, which makes it an extremely soft-shooting small 9mm. Accuracy is also superb, even with the shorter sight radius. Which one do I like shooting more? It's honestly tough to say, but I'd probably go with the full size just because the larger frame fills my hand better. The triggers on both are fantastic. The double action pull on each is just ridiculously smooth and even, on par with many good revolver triggers. With this and the P38, Walther's trigger game was really on point in the 80s. It's not super light, maybe 10 or 12 pounds, but the smoothness of the pull makes up for it easily. The single action pull has a tiny bit of creep before dropping the hammer as it raises that firing pin, but the actual break is nice and it's only about 5 pounds. Over travel is reduced by a screw in the back of the trigger, so overall the trigger is quite good. Is it a match grade single action trigger? Not quite, but it's still great for a duty gun and easily stacks up to the class leading P226 in terms of general smoothness and shootability in my opinion. I will note that due to the Compact's reduced grip size, its break is a little close, and with my larger hands it feels a bit constricted, but it's still pretty comfortable. An interesting quirk at the range worth mentioning is that the fire brass ejects to the left side of the gun, not to the right like virtually all other semi-auto pistols. This is a bit of a money-saving holdover from the P38, made more noticeable by the closed-off slide and ejection port. Please remember this fact if you're shopping for one of these guns, because I've seen ads where the seller tries to tell you that his P5 is a rare left eject model. Nobody seems to know for sure why the P5 was designed to eject to the left, but some theorize that it's to allow right-handed shooters to more easily see and clear a jam and get the gun back into action. Try it yourself sometime. It's easier to tip a pistol in your right hand to the left than awkwardly to the right to dump a bad round, and you also have better visibility of what's going on. As far as reliability, while I haven't shot any of mine extensively, probably 500 rounds or so through each, I have no issues to mention. They are said to feed most hollow points as reliably as full metal jackets, so no worries there from a defensive point of view. There have been infrequent reports, however, of the aluminum frames cracking after many thousands of rounds, especially of hot European NATO spec 9mm. I believe though this is an extremely rare occurrence, as in order to pass German testing, the gun had to fire 10,000 rounds without breakages. Nevertheless, this is something that has always plagued alloy-framed guns, and Walthers in particular. Apparently the cracks tend to happen somewhere around the takedown lever. As such, I wouldn't recommend shooting a lot of plus P through your P5. Another thing to be careful with is the flat back strap on the P5 Compact. If it's plastic, use only gentle solvents when cleaning your gun. Some, like this one, came with aluminum back straps, which should be a bit more resilient to chemicals. Prices on P5s have been up the past few years, particularly on the Compacts. A scarce pistol with only 6,500 ever being made worldwide, they tend to sell for about $2,000 or more at auction nowadays. The more common full-size P5s don't get that high though, and can still be found somewhat affordably. For a while, surplus German police models marked BMI were pretty easily available for under $500. That supply has dried up, however, and you're usually looking at maybe $600 to $700 for a surplus P5 with some wear on the finish. The nicer commercial P5s are closer to $1,000 mark, depending on any boxes and paperwork that you find with them. So who should buy the retro P5 in the 21st century? I would say that if you want to think of yourself as a Walther fan but only own something like a PPQ or a Smith & Wesson built PPK or a P22, the P5 is a great place to start getting into vintage Walthers that are still practical and fun to shoot while representing the best of a bygone era when quality and innovation were still paramount. They are cheaper and in some ways a little more approachable than the P88, I think, and are likely more rugged and reliable thanks to their battle-tested P38 DNA. Strange as it may sound, I also think SIG fans should give a hard look into the full-size P5. They have similar controls and both have great DASA triggers, but the P5 may actually have an edge in shooting characteristics thanks to the lower bore axis and non-tilting barrel design. Basically, if you're a P226 or P225 lover, I bet you'll love the P5. Honestly, if not for the low capacity and lack of parts availability, I would genuinely recommend a good condition P5 to be someone's one and only gun. The heel-mounted mag release and the 8+1 capacity limit mean it's not going to replace your Glock or your M&P for tactical training classes, but for virtually anyone else who just wants a quality, reliable 9mm for range and defensive use and that isn't one of the usual suspects every gun forum hive mind will tell you to get, I think the P5 is a winner that really needs a few more minutes of fame on YouTube. So those are my thoughts on the outstanding but apparently ignored Walther P5 and P5 Compact. For a look into the future here, I'm thinking of doing either the Medusa revolver or Mateba MTR8 as my next review videos, in 4K of course. And I'm going to do a thorough review on Walther's excellent P88 family soon too, so please stay tuned for that, and as always, thanks for watching. P.S. I know I'll get some comment about my pronunciation of Walther through this video, so I'll explain. The correct way to say this German company's name is Walther, but being that pedantic just makes you sound like a pretentious D-bag. To my ears though, Walther just sounds so wrong, like hearing someone say tortilla or jalapeno at a Mexican restaurant. So I split the difference and I at least say the TH part correctly. Say it however you want, that's how I'm gonna roll.